Hey everybody, welcome to another StarCraft 2 tutorial. This time we're having a closer look at a Terran opening. We were focusing a little bit on Zerg in the last few videos, especially on roach openings on 2 and 3 bases against Terran, and we also had a quick look at a Swarm host build on 2 bases against Protoss. But a lot of Terran players have asked me, okay, can you do something with Terran? And I have a couple of builds prepared already that I want to show you in the future, but the first thing that we're going to start with is a bit more of an all-in-ish and cheesy opening. It's a very strong opening that you can use against Zerg, and you can basically just start to punish now all the Zerg players that have been giving you trouble with the roach builds that I've shown in the past. So something for the Terran players to take revenge. It's a really strong build that was played by players like Polt, Demuslim used it, and Maker just used it in the Shoutcraft America to take down Vibe in the second game of the series. So it's a Proxy Reaper build where you try to take your opponent down as soon as possible in the game. And of course, with all the proxy builds, you leave yourself a little bit vulnerable. So you have to realize that this is not really your standard, stable, open build where you can transition into a mid-game. You don't necessarily take down your opponent, and you might end up in games where you have to float your barracks back in your main base because we are starting off with 2 proxy barracks here. But it's something where you really aim to kill your opponent early on in the game. It's a very strong build that also works, as just mentioned, on the pro player and the grandmaster level, but especially when you're in the lower leagues, you can do quite a lot with this build. It focuses a little bit more on the micro than the macro aspect, but if you have a decent micro and you can pull your units back that are being attacked and you can kite a little bit, you should have a lot of success with this build. The game that we are analyzing, the player that we are having a closer look at, is actually Demuslim. You can follow him on Twitter at EG_DemuslimRC. And he's using the account, I think, Power Drone here. It's an AKA, it's usually an account that is being used by Machine, but Muslim had a huge problem on the North American ladder. His MMR was just way too good, so he was only hitting 1 or 2 opponents, and that's why he borrowed the account and was playing on a Grandmaster level with that new account and was trying out also a few new builds. And this is one of the builds that he was trying to execute. Polt showed it several times on ladder and also in tournaments, so very strong opening, and we're having a closer look at the build right now. Okay, so in the game itself you can see that we have our Terran player, which is Demuslim, now starting to the bottom right of a kill on flats, and the Zerg player starts to the top left in blue. This is one of those strategies where you really have to, you're a little bit map dependent with it, because you want to have a lot of cliffs, you want to have access points for your Reapers. So what happens here is we have 8 SCVs in total, so we go up to 8 supply, and then the 8th SCV pops out. You can see that we have roughly 100 minerals, and that's when we go starting with our first supply depot, which you can see right here. So the supply depot starts, and at the same time we already have the second, or well, the first SCV moving out, the second SCV who comes into play here. The Zerg, on the other hand, who starts to the top left, we would expect him to go into a 15 hatch with still the standard opening against Zerg, and then take his spawning pool, maybe even take the gas first, depending on how greedy he wants to play. So we're going down, and you can really already see that we have quite a few minerals. And this is a build where also Demuslim was still trying to experiment a little bit. He's running right into an overlord here, which you always want to dodge, and this is why he changes the building placement for his barracks a little bit. So let's just pause here for a second and have a quick look at what exactly we are facing here. So at the same time when we have the barracks building, we take the gas in the main base, and this is a very, very aggressive build. With proxy barracks, you always have to be a little bit careful where exactly you build the barracks, and you want to try to avoid that your opponent knows what's going on. In this particular scenario, the Zerg player for some reason did not really connect the dots. I mean, in this case you already know that something fishy is going on if you see the SCV out this early, and if the SCV actually doesn't go into your main base to scout what's going on. So the Zerg player should have known that something's happening here. He must have missed the SCV, which is always something that you have to account for. I mean, it happens. So we have the barracks building here. As mentioned, we started with the 8th drone starting, sorry, the 8th SCV of course, starting with the supply depot. We send at the same time another SCV out that starts with the first barracks here. The overlord pattern is something, if you know what the standard overlord patterns are, then you can try to avoid them. It's always better if you can build those barracks in positions where they can't be scouted. So you could, for example, decide to build the barracks somewhere over here, which is also a very valid entry point. You could decide to try to build it over there. Just try to find areas on the map where you think that the opponent is not going to scout with one of his overlords. This is one of those builds where Demuslim was also trying to experiment a little bit, so it's not completely 100% refined. This is just one way how you can execute it, but you will see later on that there are still a couple of points where you can optimize the build. So we take the gas as mentioned at the same time, or immediately after we took the barracks, and then we started to build additional SCVs again. We are currently looking at 9 SCVs. We started to build an additional one while we were on the way out, and we are already getting another one. So this is SCV number 9 here. And Overlord is still on the move. You can see in the Zerg's main base he's now at 15 supply. That's the time when you send the drone over to your natural to build the hatch first, which is exactly what he does here. So it goes in right away. Demuslim sends now a second SCV out, and with the timing that he chose to do this, you can see that the SCV is going to turn around fairly soon. Just a quick check what's going on here, but at this point in time already the barracks nearly done, so you will start the second barracks over here. The gas in the main base is now mining from 2, and you can see at the SCV count that we have 11 SCVs. So we're constantly producing SCVs, but as soon as the barracks finishes over here, we still have the means of building 1 Reaper, and we have 100 minerals, so we can build the additional barracks very soon. But you could skip on an additional SCV here and get the barracks a little bit faster, but it still works out pretty well. The Zerg player in this game does actually not skip anything with his timing. We have him with a spawning pool right away. He doesn't build the extra drones, or at least doesn't play too greedy. Doesn't go into an additional gas before he starts with the pool. So he has this very early on. In the main base we are still SCVing up a little bit. We have like 12 right now. We're getting SCV number 13, and we are now starting with our first few Reapers, and the one is actually already jumping into the main base. Sees of course the hatch first, and now it's time for the micro. This is a strategy that really depends on micro quite a bit, so you need to be able to focus on your units. Zerg player is doing quite a good job at saving his drone so far, but you can already see that the second barracks is about to be completed, and with 3 SCVs in gas we are in a position where we can build 2 Reapers at a time. So the Zerg player here, this is actually a pretty crucial point in the game, so let's just pause there for a second and analyze what's going on here. The Zerg realized that he doesn't really have anything to defend against this, and he knows that with his speedlings at the beginning, or with his Zerglings at the beginning, he can't do a lot because he needs speed. That's something that he doesn't get just yet, but he doesn't know what exactly is going on. He thinks this is actually just like maybe 1 barracks. He doesn't realize this is 2, which is really important here, because if you misjudge the situation as a Zerg in this scenario, you will be in a lot of trouble, and that's exactly what's going to happen later on. But you can see that for now the Zerg is doing an amazing job of keeping his drones alive. He started 2 extractors here, not because he wanted to take the gas, but because he wants to save those drones. They were already on low HP, and the same goes for the 3 that built the spore crawlers. So all those buildings are going to get cancelled. And for the Zerg, the one thing that I have to say here is what he did not really do well is his scouting. You will see Zerg players send out a drone to find out what's going on, and with the drone scout over here going into the main base of Demuslim, the Zerg would have realized right away from the beginning that this is a proxy build and that he should have prepared for this. But it's also a question of how you prepare, because as mentioned earlier, the pool was taken very early in the game, so he didn't cut any corners here. He can leave one of the extractors to get the gas a little bit faster, or he can decide to get spine crawlers. But whatever he does, this is a build where it's very difficult for him to don't take any losses, or to not take any losses. So the double barracks here is constantly producing the Reapers, and you can see that with the gas lining up here and the Reaper being nearly done, this is just perfect with the income to make sure that we can nearly constantly produce from double barracks. One of the mistakes that the Zerg player also made here, it would have changed it a little bit, but not too much, is that he doesn't get the second queen in his hatch. I think that this is actually a mistake. He has 2 queens queued up in his main base, so that's definitely a bit of an oversight. So you can really see that in this scenario, in this game, we have the Zerg making a few minor mistakes. But he's also doing a few things very well, as for example keeping the drones alive, as pointed out earlier. If you have an opponent that is a little bit weaker in his micro, he will also start to lose drones at this point. So this is more just focusing on what exactly Demuslim does to show you how to approach this if you want to execute such a greedy and all-in strategy. Taking a quick look at the main base, there's also one thing that I want to point out. Demuslim is building the second supply depot now right in the main base once again. What you can do, and in my opinion should do, is start with the first supply depot right over here and wall off. We could see that Demuslim, while he sent out a second SCV that he didn't really need, was in a position where he could have saved a few minerals. And the only reason why you would get the supply depot right over here is because the SCV has less travel time where it can't mine. That helps you a little bit, but I don't think that in like 99% of the cases of the people that watch this video, this really comes into play. It's more important that you really wall off here. So why exactly is that the case? The problem that you might encounter is that the Zerg decides to just run past your Reapers, try to sneak by, maybe get a few links over here and squeeze past somehow here at the ramp and run into your main base. And that is the worst case scenario for you. You're in a position where you have your production structures right over here, so it's very difficult for you to send reinforcements to the bottom right. It takes quite a long time. So if suddenly 6 Zerglings appear in your main base and you can't rely on a lot of SCVs defending, you will lose most of your harvesters, and that kind of breaks your neck. So you should, in my opinion, make sure that you have a wall over there. That's something that you can do to actually make this a little bit stronger. This means that if the Zerg actually sends the Zerglings over, you can just completely lift your supply depots and you'll be completely fine. But coming back to the game at hand, we now start producing a constant stream of Reapers. And with the second supply depot nearly done, you can really see the timing here. So he's just started doing this a few seconds ago. In-game seconds, that's 20. So make sure that you do that just in time so that you don't get supplier blocked roughly before you start this Reaper over here. So that would roughly be at 15 supply where you started. You have the minerals, you have the gas, just make sure that you don't forget about it. You don't have to produce it at exactly the certain amount of supply. It's more of realizing that you do it at roughly 14, 15 so that you can constantly produce your Reapers, which is the most important part. So let's have a quick look how this goes on. We have now in the main base the Zerg player still trying to defend against the Reaper. The Lings are out. We don't have too many Reapers yet, so the Zerg cancels, uses all his SCVs, leaves one extractor alive and takes gas. So he plays this really smart. But we already have 2 Reaper. And this is now the time in the game where the double Reaper production comes into play. Zerg realizes that he has to do something, so he produces more and more Queens right now. Adds additional ones, but we are now trying to hit at the natural, where already the first few drones are in position. Zerg once again does a good job, gets for the extractors, but the Zerg misjudged the situation, and that's something that he realizes now. He's like, wait a minute, you have a lot of Reapers there, so we are starting to snipe drones, and we are sniping quite a lot of them. And with the Reapers and the health regeneration that they have now in Heart of the Swarm, you need to make sure that you micro a little bit and pull the damaged Reapers out. And you can really see the Zerg is struggling here. He doesn't have the income that he wants, he doesn't have the production. We are picking off drones fast, and we are picking them off really fast. We continue to build SCVs. Our SCV count is now at 14. We have 5 Reapers, and even this surround with the Zerglings doesn't do anything against us. The Zerg is doing everything that he can. He's producing additional Queens, he's getting speed, and without speed, the Reapers are just way faster than everything that the Zerg player has in this game. So this is a lot of DPS. By now we have a ton of Reapers here, and we just don't stop. We just don't stop at all. We get Reaper after Reaper. We are at 6, we're looking at 8 pretty soon. Should get a supply depot here, depending on how many Reapers we want to build. And the Zerg is just really frustrated. You can already see at the resources lost tab. We didn't lose anything just because we keep those Reapers alive. The Zerg loses another Queen, loses another 2. He has 1,100 resources lost, and that's the time when we lose our first Reaper, or Demuslim does. Then we take down another Queen. So let's pause this for another second. We jump into the main base again, and you can really see that Demuslim is now playing a game where he heads into the additional command center. So he follows this up with a macro game, just in case something happens that he didn't account for. But you can already see that this game is in a position where the Zerg player has lost way too much. He has lost 7 harvesters already. He has lost several queens. We have him in a position where he's down in harvesters. He's at 13 against 17. And we could now decide to get this additional supply depot a little bit earlier. Demuslim decides to go into his command center here. So that's a very dangerous position for the Zerg to be in. One of the things that we also squeezed in is our tech to the orbital command, which gives us an additional foothold on the mules. You can do that whenever you feel it's right, when you have the right amount of SCVs. So that is not like a set time. You can see that we have a lot of excess minerals right now with the additional gas. So looking at this, the Zerg is really in trouble. He has one additional extractor down at the natural because he was saving this drone, but he's completely overwhelmed, and our units are much faster than his. So with decent-ish micro, we are in the better position, especially since he did not get a spine crawler, and a lot of Zerg players will be very reluctant to get the spine crawler. So we continue to just pressure him. As mentioned, we are getting the second command center now. He has a lot of Zerglings, but we just pull those Reapers back, we jump down the cliffs, we micro them, and he's losing everything here. Speed is still not done, and we just pick off drones one by one. Every single one hurts here, and the production is so limited because he couldn't really work with his queens a lot. We are now in the middle of the mineral patches, and the Zerg has given up at this point, so he's leaving the game. And we won the match, took a convincing win here with a double Proxy Reaper build. So a very, very dangerous strategy for a Zerg player to face. And as a Terran player, if you are willing to take the risk, to take the gamble, then this is a very, very strong strategy to execute on maps like a Kill and Wastes. So as you can see, a very aggressive build that we had a look at today, and a Terran opening that can catch a lot of Zerg players off guard. It was exactly the same build that Maker used against Vibe at StarCraft America, and also a build that we've seen several times now on ladder and in tournaments by players like Polt and Demuslim. So just to sum the build up once again, once you reach your 8 SCVs, you build a supply depot, and at the same time you send an SCV out towards your opponent's base. You start with your first barracks, and at the same time you take your refinery. You take your gas that will constantly be mined from 3 SCVs once it's completed. During that time, during that build time, you produce additional SCVs and you go straight into the first Reaper once the barracks is finished, and you build a second barracks at the same position, which is like really important. You produce SCVs, up to 14 SCVs, then you go into your orbital tech at this point, and you just take your second supply depot once that you started with the orbital tech, and then you have a lot of supply that you can use for the double Reaper production, and it's all about the micro at this point. You of course try to SCV up a little bit. 14 is completely enough. That's exactly the same amount that Demuslim used in this game, and then you can do whatever you want. You can go into the additional factory, try to follow that up with battalions. It's of course a little bit safer to get your command center behind it. But keep in mind that it's always a good option to invest the extra minerals if you want to wall off at your ramp. Really important if your opponent is trying to sneak around you and get in your main base. There are quite a lot of players, especially on the Korean ladder, that lost because Zerg was able to sneak 6 Zerglings into their main, took down their harvesters, suddenly they couldn't produce any more units, and yeah, everything just spiraled down from there. But it's really important that you focus on your units quite a bit. So you can see that this is not a build that requires a lot of macroing, but it requires a lot more micro. You really have to pay attention to your Reapers. You don't want to lose them early on. So keep that in mind when you execute this build. Practice it a little bit. Try it against the computer easy, for example, just to get a feel for it. And then hit ladder, and as soon as you have a Zerg player, you can try to pull that off. Always keep in mind that it's really important where you build those barracks. If the Zerg knows early on what you're doing, he might be able to counter that. So try to hide your barracks and try to dodge the normal overlord scouting patterns that a Zerg player uses on a certain map. But besides of that, it's a really strong build. It's a very, very aggressive and a strong tool at your disposal, so I guess that you will have quite a bit of success on ladder. Make sure that if you execute the build and it works well, leave a comment on YouTube. You can also send me a tweet on Twitter at Khaldor, and if you like the build and have some success with it, I would really appreciate an upvote and if you could subscribe to the channel. That's it for the day. I hope that you enjoyed the build, and good luck on ladder. Bye bye. See you next time.